Sup shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SB Patrons video today that I'm making for Eli as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen off of the album The Slow Rush from Tame Impala. This track is titled It Might Be Time. We've got the art up on the screen here for the album. We're going to listen through this track from start till finish and we're going to hear what we think. Let's do it, let's go. What do we got? Get the lyrics up on the screen.
Something doesn't feel right. That's enough for one night. Hope you get home alright. There I go, blaming on the weather. But hey, there's nothing wrong. I'm only tired of all these voices always saying nothing lasts forever.
Kind of freeform with the groovometer of it.
It might be time to face it. It ain't as fun as it used to be. No, you're going under. You ain't as young as you used to be. It might be time to face it. You ain't as cool as you used to be. No, you wanna come on. You ain't as young as you used to be. It might be time to face it. It might be time to face it.
It's great to use that space there when things are so pushed like those drum kits.
I've been lost before, so tell me it's not over. 'Cause I finally got something going, and suddenly all my friends are growing up and moving on. I must be missing something, 'cause I just wanna keep this dream alive for now. Don't they know nothing lasts forever?
Subtle accents on the keys there. Great for flow and groove.
It might be time to face it.
Interesting phase or flanger on the kit.
Nobody knows what you come here for. You're going under. They roll their eyes when you're at the door. It might be time. It might be time to face it.
Great way to implement a drum fill without it being too prominent in the mix, just to filter it like that, go to some certain frequencies.
Embrace it. We promise to come visit. It might be time. It might be time to face it. You ain't as fun as you used to be. You won't be calm. You ain't as cool as you used to be. It might be time to face it.
I mean, they're filthy sounding synth basses, but they're not aggressive, which is really interesting. Nice looping at that melodic motif there.
Face it.
And so that was It Might Be Time by Tame Impala. It's great to listen to some Tame Impala. I'm not familiar with their music, but it's definitely some interesting stuff. We're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. And so welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from my next name Tame Impala, titled It Might Be Time. Thanks again to Eli as well for the request for this month. In this section we're going to be providing an overall song analysis as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally our general thoughts, or my general thoughts I suppose, from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? I think this track is effectively about someone who is looking at their life and realizing they're getting older and they don't fit in where they used to, and they're just kind of thinking it's time to call it. Just to go, okay, this is our life now, we've got to maybe close this chapter. And we had dreams or ambitions of how certain things are supposed to go in our life, and maybe we're just not there anymore, maybe they're just not possible. So, you know, it's kind of bittersweet. And I think maybe this is a conversation they're having with another person who's maybe not willing to let go of that, and they're promising them they're still going to come visit and still going to hang out, but just letting them know, hey, it's not working. We need to kind of accept the reality as it is and move on from there. I thought the vocals delivered those lines well. It kind of sounds like the vocalist is having a conversation with the person. The expression works neatly. It sounds like they're calling out a lot of the time. I think partly because of the processing on the vocals, making it more sort of resonant amidst the highs there. The use of the head voice there. It's effective. We've got solid vocal technique. We hit the notes cleanly. There's nice bits of reverb and kind of almost sounds like it's going like a loudspeaker in certain parts. But yeah, it's a neat way of communicating, and I just think it's not an all the time thing, but the vocals are clearly the focal point in the mix when they are. Although we do allow plenty of time to be able to appreciate the other instrumental components as well. We have like backing vocals as well, which are reverb laden, a bit more sort of subtle there for depth within the arrangement, but they're like a sometimes thing, either in call and response or something to add more sort of flavor and sort of texture to the piece. And it's also very gentle at some points, which I think again is appropriate expression wise. But yeah, so I feel like the expression, the vocal technique are effective. The track is 4 minutes 33, so it's outside of the 2 to 4 minute sweet spot, where if it's longer than 4 minutes, you really need to try and change things or develop what you've got existing so that it doesn't become overplayed, or, you know, just make it more progressive or go on a new journey or add a twist. So here I think that we've got this kind of main sort of overall atmosphere or ambience to the piece that carries through, and I just think it eventually gets to a point where it becomes less about context and exposition and more about just kind of accepting, you know, that hey, there's nothing wrong, you just need to kind of move on. It's comprised of a few different instruments, such as I think like definitely synths, basses and drums. And it's so wonderful at the start with that very kind of pretty sequencer there, that pulse there, instantiating a rhythm or groove before the drum kit comes in. And drums, of course, is quite prominent there. There's a lot of compression on the bus for the drums there. It's a very sort of heavy use of ratio there on that, and it kind of chokes it. So it's got a nice kind of bashfulness to it, both literally as well as like it's brash, but it has presence within the mix due to the boxiness of it. And we open up the filters on some of these synth sequences as we go through the piece there, and we give it life and dynamic range to it, which I appreciate it. It's just a very sensible thing that you can do when you're producing a track, is introduce a texture, but then like manipulate it over time so that it doesn't become stale. And as it gets, as more high end comes to play as you go further through the piece, it just sounds brighter and like you're building into something. So it's just, yeah, it's great. I think there's even some bass which is heavily distorted there, and it's just filthy sounding, and it's very aggressive, but at the same time it's almost like it's trying to maybe sort of mirror the sound of a nightclub where we might be going if we can't get in because we're too old. And you can kind of appreciate how that hints at more context for the story. It's kind of a nice fit for, again, the boxiness, how choked the drums are, the kind of clashiness and distortion knows, the grit and gain to it. But it's also not too loud in the mix, so it isn't too aggressive. I think they found a nice equilibrium there. There's like this consistent kind of heavily modulated guitar, bum 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 bum, and I might be tripping there. I'm struggling to sort of ascertain whether it's keys or if it's guitar, but either way, if it is guitar, it's more about the actual output rather than the core sort of tone and texture of the instrument itself. It's got this kind of bum 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 bum. It's got this very pleasant loop that it does with some extended chords there, adding a bit of sophistication, funkiness to it. That's an interesting amalgam with the siren sound that we have with the synths, like kind of saying, hey, we need to be careful about what's going on here. It's kind of alarming, and it oscillates between either fifths or an octave there, and it's, you know, like and it's just more literal. You need to pay attention to this kind of stuff. And we adjust that kind of really kind of gruesome, gritty synth as we go through to go up and up ranges a little bit and have occasional sort of like sub-synth, sort of pseudo-synth solos or something like that. Just exploring more of the mid-range when the vocals aren't as present. And I just like that we're making the use of that real estate that we have without as much heavy extrapolation going on. And there's changes of meter there where if you don't pay attention to like the number of beats, it's fine. But if you are, you're kind of going, oh, are we kind of looping to add an extra beat sometimes to fit the meter of either the riff or the vocals? Because if that's the case, it's kind of cool from like a structural perspective there, that we're not being literal to 4/4 the entire time. I also think in general, the kind of mistness of all the surrounding elements within the piece just makes it seem almost nostalgic, like we're looking back into our own head about stuff, about maybe with rose-tinted spectacles, about how things used to be. So I think that's kind of neat from just an actual production perspective, I suppose, more than anything. But thematically, I think it's mostly about the kind of complexity of the emotions with the extensions and the harmonies there. It's a minor leaning track. I think it's in a minor key there, but it tries to add some brighter elements to not be too dire about it. I think tonally and texturally, it underlies a conflict between the frustrated angst we feel with distorted elements, as well as the kind of calm and sort of like sweet embrace of the softer keys there with the glowing chorus on them. I think we're trying to put different tones, textures, and thoughts into this, and I feel like we find a good balance with it. Studio recording, mixing, and mastering is tight. I like the overall production of the different vocals, sort of like keys / guitar, synth, bass, and drum takes. They each have this sort of core functionality and express different ideas in a way that seems incredibly coherent. There are no weird resonant frequencies in the frequency spectrum. Music surrounds you in the headphones. The reverb towers and delays and things are exquisite. There is dynamic range, although it's mainly a compositional thing, and there are some elements which have a complete lack of it for a stylistic approach, such as the drums, which I think are also cool. So we combine those in different ways, and they typically are articulated neatly. It's nice to allow without pumping, so the bus compression and limiting is, well, there's a bit of pumping to be fair. The bus compression is limiting is handled. And I've got no real applicable constructive critique to it. I feel like they chose the right length for it to go to. I don't know what they could have done more so afterwards. They kind of explained what they needed to, and I felt myself getting, from a general listener's perspective, I found myself kind of getting lost in this. And like, I understood what was going on within the first minute, and then I just kind of wanted my brain to turn off a little bit and just enjoy the sound and sort of like sight of things. And I think that's a compliment to the piece there. I think it's a track which you can listen to actively as well as passively and have like an equivalent really nice time. It'd be interesting to hear how this kind of rolls in relation to the rest of the album. But either way, just a really solid track. Thank you for watching my review of this song from an ex named Tame Impala titled It Might Be Time, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via the various social medias and the Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next SB Patrons video. Spider Hands out.